Hello, friends and brothers. This is Justin Jones with the Masonic Improvement podcast, YouTube channel. You name it, we're there. I'm joined with my co-host, Brother Dennis Yates. What's up, Dennis?
The broadcast for Masonic Improvement. The broadcast for your Masonic education, infiltration, manipulation,
Procrastination,
agitation,
insubordination,
but not segregation.
True that.
We're all in.
True that.
That was so bad. We just lost about half of our 5 listeners stopped listening because of that intro.
They're feeling that agitation. All the procrastination.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And the frustration of no sublimation.
Oh.
What a temptation.
Oh. All right.
Well, hello, friends and brothers, for listening to us even after that. And that's
if you stuck with us, then you passed the test.
I know it. You're in. It's gonna be good.
So we're going to talk about bylaws tonight. There's been some recent changes with some resolutions at Grand Lodge in January. And really, we need to talk more probably about rules and regulations, but I think it's good just to go ahead and talk about bylaws at the same time. Why not? Since you're going to look at your rules and regulations or maybe create them in some cases, why not go ahead and look at your bylaws while you're at it? 2 birds with 1 stone, right? So, Dennis, I know you've been studying up on the whole bylaw and rule and regulation situation and all that. So I'll let you just take charge, man.
Well, it's a pretty easy concept to once you hear it out in layman's terms. If you read it in the law book, of course, everything is so colluded, or maybe not colluded, but so inundated with so many different terms for law that the normal Joe just isn't going to pay attention to, and they're going to get bored with it and just walk away because there's too much crap around there's too much fluff around the actual intent of the law. And not to talk ill of fluff, because we love Brother Fluff and we would never say anything otherwise.
You're talking about the bad kind of fluff.
Yes, the bad kind of fluff, not the good fluff. So, real short and sweet, we all have bylaws in our organization. We have to, because we are a part of the corporation of the Grand Lodge of Texas. The Grand Lodge of Texas has the corporate charter, and they also hold the 501c3, which is the actual charitable organization that we attach to. We have a 501c10, which is like the leech of the 501c3. We're more of just a fraternity that does charitable things. So we're not really the charitable corporation. We're just the attached.
Or a 501c10. Is that what you're saying?
The lodge is, being a subordinate lodge, we are a 501c10, and that's because we attach to the 501c3, and we are a fraternal organization. Gotcha. So with any kind of an organization like that that's registered with the federal government or the state, you have to have bylaws. And that's the whole reason I even started all that hoopla, was just to get to the point. You got to have bylaws. But that's why I wanted to say that, because a lot of people don't even realize why they have to have bylaws. They just know, it's kind of like my wife is part of a gardening club, right? Mm-hmm. And they have bylaws. It's not as stringent as ours because they're not an actual governed entity. They're not a corporation. They don't have a charter of that nature to be yanked by the government. So it's not
Well,
as important.
even a lot of school organizations have bylaws. NJHS, the honor societies, they have bylaws, or they're supposed to. Student
Right.
council is supposed to have bylaws. The one I used to run had bylaws. And even though it's not really, like you say, it's not like a government organization or anything like that, it still kind of covers your tail, because if your bylaws
Well,
say, like, here's the criteria for membership, and like these are the things you get kicked out for, these are the things you can't be an officer for,
yes.
kind of saves your hide, because then whenever a kid does something they shouldn't, and they are no longer in NHS or honor society, or whatever you'll call it. I'm in a middle school, so I'll call it NJHS, or like student council, and the parents call angry. Well, it's in your bylaws, and
Right.
your tail's covered, and they should have had a copy of that. So,
Right. Well, and that's a you make a very good point right there
like, I try.
because number one, first very good point you made is that they are your governing documents for your organization, no matter what kind of organization it is. The bylaws are the governing rules and well, they're the governing documents, the laws that govern your entity, right? Good point number one. The the other point that you made was everyone that's a member, subscribing member, must be made available a copy of the bylaws. They must be given a copy of the bylaws. That's why you are supposed to have them when you become a Master Mason.
Mhm.
You should get a copy of your lodge's bylaws as soon as you're made a Master Mason. Now, they may just say, okay, go to the site, download them, upload them, whatever. But,
They
that's
have to
also
be
not,
made available in some way.
yes. Now, with that being said, we also have standard operating procedures now, or rules and regulations for our bylaws. And a lot of lodges are not uploading those into the Grandview system with their bylaws. So they're uploading the bylaws, the basic form, which we'll get to here in a little bit,
Mhm.
but they're not uploading the rules and regulations that go with that form.
I got a
And
question.
go ahead.
So I'm not a secretary, right? So the secretary, I assume, or whoever, they upload those bylaws to the Grandview system. Are they accessible to all members of that lodge to the Grandview system, or is it just there for?
Yes.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yes.
Is there a separate location for like your standard operating procedures? Where is it like a separate
No,
upload? So you
there
can just
is
upload all
not.
the
They
files up
should.
there.
Right. So the the way that they're done is they're scanned in and then uploaded.
Let's see.
So because they have to show signature, they have to show all that stuff that makes them valid bylaws, right?
Gotcha.
So it has all the stuff filled in, and then they scan that document and upload it with the for their bylaws. So technically, what they should be doing is scanning the form and then also scanning in the rules and regulations to go with it as well. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. Um, well, I guess we can segue into it now unless you want to touch into something else.
I just wanted to say that you could also, and I've done this on this. That's how I know you could do it. Is that you can upload um, the same files to the accepted, and
Yes,
and everybody can access it that way.
yes, you can. But you have to have a member that's a member of the accepted that has the files to be able to upload them. But again, it's only going to be as complete as the user. So if your secretary doesn't submit everything, you're not going to get everything, which
Mhm.
really doesn't make any sense because you're doing this for accessibility for your members. It's not for anybody else, it's for your members. And so if you fail to do one of the most basic things, you're scanning it in anyways. Why not just scan it in complete?
Yeah.
Scan it in and make them complete, not scan it incomplete. They're scanning it incomplete already. So, with that being said, I have a copy of my original bylaws for my lodge, but we have gone to the new Form 23. And for those of you who do not know what the Form 23 is, a few years back, we voted at Grand Lodge to make the process easier to change your bylaws. And the reason why is because right now you have to basically when you form a committee to change your bylaws, and that committee comes back with recommendations, and then those recommendations have to be read in lodge, and then they have to hold over for an entire month, an entire cycle, until the next stated meeting. It's a lunar cycle. Mm-hmm. So it needs to hold over for a month till the next stated meeting, not the second one in the same month, but the next main stated meeting, right? The one that you submit in. So it needs to hold over a month, and then the next month you can vote on it. And so then you got to read it all again, or you should, if you're really doing the right thing, because if somebody wasn't there and they object to one of whatever it is, they should have their opportunity to vote. Just because they weren't there doesn't, unless they're one of those guys that, you bring in, you shuffle in just to stack the vote. But that's a different episode. But so currently with the bylaws, if you're voting on bylaws, you have to hold over a full month, and then do the vote. And then you have to submit it in to Grand Lodge for approval of those bylaws.
So if you want to, just to be sure I'm clear, if I want to change the bylaws, you make a motion to change, and then a letter has to go out, and it's discussion the next month, and then the month after that would be when you vote. Is that not correct, or is that?
No, letter doesn't have to go out. Oh, well, yes, it does. Yes, it does. But normally you form a committee to decide on what bylaws need to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you don't necessarily have to do the motion that next month.
Gotcha.
You send so you do the committee when they're done, when they're completed. Then you send out the letter. You read it out in lodge, send out the letter stating that you're going to vote on it the next month. And then the next month you come back and you vote on it. But it's already been read in lodge. You don't have to reread it, but it's best practice to go ahead and reread it again before you vote on it. But you do have that month period in between.
So let's do an example. Let's say I have a lodge that meets at 7:30, and I want to meet at 6, so we can get the meeting done early and have dinner after, right? So we want to change the time from 7:30 to 6. So the worship. So say it's January, like it is right now. The worship master forms a committee, and then I don't know. You need a committee, but so the worship master forms a committee. It's read the second month and discussed, and a letter sent out, and then you vote the third month.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Normally the reason why you do a committee is because you don't just change bylaws over one thing. That's when you form a committee, because you want to look at all your bylaws and see what's current and what's relative, because it's such a big change, and because it requires Grand Lodge approval. And the reason why it requires Grand Lodge approval for just your bylaws, if you have never gone to the Form 23, is because if you look at it, the bylaws are a legal and binding document, and it's written out in form. And so it needs to go to Grand Lodge and make sure that it's in proper form to be able to be upheld. It's not necessarily that they're going to decide if you can or cannot meet on a Wednesday. The reason they're doing it is checking for proper form if you're still using the old bylaws per se. But they went to the Form 23, so that's a good segue, right?
Yeah.
They went to the Form 23, which is a pre-filled out form of bylaws to where you just fill in the blanks on the date and time and stuff like that, and all the basics on how your lodge is going to run. And then you submit that Form 23 because everything is already written out and already preset by Grand Lodge to begin with, except for these basic things that they could care less about. That doesn't matter to them whether they open their doors or not. It just goes through. So once you fill out the Form 23, you no longer have those bylaws from 1854, right? Or 1852 in my case. So those bylaws are now gone. All those formal documents are now replaced with this Form 23. And all you have to do that Form 23 is send it in one time. So that definitely requires a committee, because you want your committee to look at your bylaws and make sure that everything can be handled in that Form 23. Because the Form 23 is what you do, right? And you already know this. The Form 23 is what you do. The rules and regulations, or the standard operating procedures, whatever you want to call them this month, that's how you do it. So you have to make sure that your current bylaws are in alignment with the Form 23, and then you have to create the rules and regulations or standard operating procedures that extend beyond what the Form 23 provides.
What are some examples of some things that you would put in the standard operating procedures? I know you said that's not what's in the Form 23, but for those that might be curious, like what examples could you give offhand if people are just looking like, okay, I understand that it's what's not included into 23, but what exactly are some good things that other lodges have done?
Well, different things like education nights and things like that. If you want to put that this is something your lodge does, this is part of the identity of your lodge, is we are going to have an education night every night on this night every month, or every Thursday of this week every month we're going to have an education night. Or like, it would benefit our lodge to put in our standard operating procedures that we have a floor school every Wednesday, but we would have to put a clause in there, like unless hardship, occurs or whatever, in case everybody gets sick and can't show up, or unless we have a degree or something that we're doing that night in lieu of. You would want to have some kind of verbiage in there, but that could be something you could have in your SOPs, right? Now, another more recent item that would need to be in there, which we discussed at dinner tonight after floor school, we were talking about the new Resolution 9 with alcohol in the lodge. And one of the brothers was under the impression that not doing anything would just allow for it would basically, I can't remember if he said it would automatically be for or automatically be against, but that's not the case. It doesn't matter which way your lodge wants to do it. There has to be something, one way or another, in your standard operating procedures. You have to take a stand on that new law, that newly amended law for Resolution 9, so that your lodge has its governing documents on how it's going to handle this situation.
Mhm.
Otherwise, your insurance company could say, well, you didn't do anything, so this lodge, and this lodge serves alcohol, so we're going to charge you insurance based on your decisions to serve alcohol, even though you didn't decide to serve alcohol, right?
I see.
So, and there is, depending on how you plan on doing it, there could be an increase in insurance coverage, though I doubt it'll be a ton, but I'm not an insurance agent, so I don't want to say what that'll be. All we know is that there's no actual liability towards the lodge for anything that occurs based on current laws today in Texas and in the nation. There's no liability to the lodges, but that would be something that you would want to have in your bylaws to make sure that other entities are well aware of your stance in it. That would be good for if you're planning on renting out your properties.
Yeah, smart.
and standard form on what you're going to do in renting properties. And if you're going to have a standard lease, then you would mention in there that you would use promulgated lease, blah, 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 for renting out properties. And that way it's part of your rules and regulations. Because your insurance company will definitely want to know if you're doing quinceañeras and stuff like that in your lodge.
I found an old copy of one of my old lodges. We called them guidelines at the time, but I emailed that to you. I think it was back from 2011 or something like that. It's like super old, but it's kind of interesting to look back, because I was actually the one that, this is before I knew you or anything. I found a lodge. I think it was like a TO lodge in Colorado or something. It's like, oh, that looks great to have something like that. And we voted and passed it in the lodge and everything. But looking back, I was like, I don't think anyone knows about this anymore. We're not doing that. That's not how that's working right now. So I sent it to you just for kicks.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to look at that. I didn't realize that you sent that to me.
I just did. But like while I was like, you were talking, I was like, didn't I have some old guidelines for my old lodge? And so I was looking through my email real quick and found them.
So that's another very valid point right there, that of why you need to have a committee regularly meet at least every couple of years, if not once a year, to determine if your bylaws are in line with the culture of your lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Because it changes from year to year. So if you if a master comes in and wants a bunch of stuff changed, he has to do it through the bylaws, and it has to be voted on by the lodge. So that's a lot of people don't realize that. They think that the master has all sorts of ultimate authority and power over the lodge, but he only has ultimate authority and power over what those bylaws, rules, and regulations allow him to have ultimate authority and power over.
Yeah.
And I guess that's also a good reason, and can be a bad reason, why our law book is so huge. Because it's like, well, we don't want people to have a deciding choice every year on this matter, and this matter. I don't want my worshipful master to have this gray area that they can play around with and just make things happen in the lodge, because they have ultimate authority over all these matters, mm-hmm. as long as it's not in the rules and regulations, right? So you can go too far with it also, because we've seen it in our Texas law books.
Yeah. Yeah. As I was looking over that as you were talking, like earlier before I sent it to you, I was like, yeah, that's way longer than I think it needs to be. So I agree wholeheartedly, because if it's too long, you kind of regulate yourself into a corner. Or it's
Yeah,
possible
you're
to do
tying your
that.
hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're tying your own hands. And do you really want to do that? So that's why it's important to have a good committee that's um, unbiased and willing to take a good, hard, close look at it and see if it really aligns with the culture of the lodge
Mhm.
to make those kind of suggestions to the lodge to vote on. Now, once we move into the era of Form 23, let's say your lodge has always done bylaws,
Mhm.
or always had their formal bylaws in uh, in a formal status. They want to go to the new setup with the Form 23. Well, all they have to do, the change to do that, is to send it in, fill
Yeah.
it out, you vote on it, do your 2 month process or 3 month process if you have a committee working on things, but do that process and then just mail it in, and it's going to automatically get approved because you're just filling in the blanks that are there. And the same thing goes later on. If you want to change something on that Form 23, you still have to do the 2 month process because it is a change to the bylaws. But when you send it in, there's no checking anything by Grand Lodge. They just approve it, and it's already basically approved, and it's just updating their records.
See?
Now, on your rules and regulations, on your standard operating procedures, one and the same, if y'all weren't paying attention earlier, there's different names for those things. So, y'all could call it anything in your own lodge. What were your old ones called?
Owen said guidelines.
Yeah.
Also refer to them as rules and regulations, and you like SOPs, standard operating procedures. But
Yeah. Don't be an SOB. Use your SOP. I was waiting all night for that.
we are bad tonight.
So the rules and regulations, now that's a different story. Now those, because they are the how and not the what you do, the what is what the government wants to know. The state, state and federal government wants to know the what. Now, how you do that isn't so much of a big deal. The how is more of, like we said, how we want to rent out our building, how we want to, if we want to ensure that we have certain committees every year, put that in there. Say you want a formal audit every year and not just the Form 71 filled out, then you want an audit committee of so many members that are going to take a detailed look of your lodge finances to determine the financial viability of your lodge. That would be in your standard operating procedures. Those are important things to have in there if that's important to your lodge. So now with those things, those are the hows, right? That audit is not necessary by Grand Lodge. They just want you to do the Form 71, which is supposed to be an audit, but they don't tell you how to do that audit now, do they? They just give you a sheet, and your treasurer, being the good steward he is, he's just going to fill it out for you, and then 3 people are going to sign it and give it to the worshipful master and act like they did a big job, right? I did a big, important job. So, am I wrong?
No,
Tell me
you're
I'm
right.
lying. Tell me I'm lying.
Not about that.
Not yet, anyway. So the standard operating procedures are going to be how you do what you're going to do. So that only requires the single vote. That's something that can be brought up in a month's time. So, but normally, of course, just like with bylaws. I want to put this in there because it's important to me that people be responsible with their SOPs. Set up a committee, have them look at them, and do it right. And then that way, when they do come to you and they say, "Okay, we've read it all, we're ready to present," then they can present. You can vote on it right then, and it never goes anywhere. It stays right there in the lodge. So at that point, you just print it out, send it to all your members, and you're done, son. Now, what I would recommend, because I was thinking about it while I was talking, is that you have it in you upload it to your bylaws in your Grandview, in your section of Grandview. That way you don't have to send any postage to anyone. You can email everyone that's in your Grandview and tell them the bylaws and new rules and regulations are available by going to this link on our lodge webpage in Grandview.
If you have their email, it doesn't cost anything to attach it to the email either.
Well, right, you can do that, and then
attach it to the email, upload it to the Grandview, put it in the accepted under your lodge group. You covered your bases 3 times that way.
Right. Yes. And that's the beauty of digital, guys. If your lodge is not digital in this way, you need to step it up. You know that 57% is all we have in Grandview right now?
Emails?
Yes. Only 57% of 57,000 members have their email in Grandview. Well, that's just bullshit.
So I think that was a really good breakdown. And I think if, like we said in other episodes, this is the great time to look at everything. Might as well, because of Prop 9 or Resolution 9. So if you're
because you have to, you need to.
Yeah. If you want to allow it in your lodge, you need to either add it to your SOPs or create some SOPs so you have it and then add it. While you're at it, check out your bylaws. Update your bylaws too.
And even if you only wanted to partially have it in your lodge, let's say to allow certain people, to allow renters to have alcohol within the lodge building and facilities, even if that's all you want to do, then just do that. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. That's the beauty of this resolution. It doesn't tell anybody they have to be all in or nothing. You get to decide with your lodge how you want to run it, depending on the culture of your lodge.
If you want other organizations or like to rent out your lodge, right? Maybe you as a Masonic lodge don't want your brothers to drink at the lodge. But if you want to say, hey, we have a nice building, let's let people rent it out.
Come on, Rotary.
If you want them to be able to drink, then you can put that your rules and regulations. Is there anything that you would not want in your bylaws?
Triggers anything for me.
I would recommend against putting your dues in your bylaws.
Well, actually, that's taken out with the Form 23. It goes into the rules and regulations.
But a lot of lodges still have it, and a lot of lodges like to have it because they're afraid if it's not in your bylaws, then you could just show up one day for a meeting and vote to double your dues while there's like 4 people there for a stated meeting or something. But like you're saying with the rules and regulations, I don't see why you couldn't say, because it's such a pain, right? With doing it as a bylaws change. But if you don't want that to be a possibility, you could say there needs to be this many brothers present to vote on dues, or only once every 6 months, or only once per Masonic year will we vote and do something like that. You can still kind of say, hey, we don't want because you only got to have 3 people to open a master's lodge. So what if you meet in January and no one wants to show up because you're going to Grand Lodge in 2 days, but you got enough people there and they vote, hey, we're going to double our dues.
Right.
I mean,
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. And I agree. I think that's and it all goes back to the rules and regulations are the how. This is how we want our lodge to run. And so, yeah, you would put something like that in there for sure.
That's just that's always been big to me because a lot of lodges, I know some lodges that keep them, and it's your
Right.
dues. To be frank, your dues need to be more fluid than they are. And I know people don't like that idea. They like it being set the same thing for like 20 years. But that's one thing you
Right.
need to have that flexibility. But this is not a dues conversation. But I'm just saying there's some things that if you don't have to have them in your bylaws, and if you could plug them into your rules and regulations, do that.
Yeah. What if he becomes on a fixed income all of a sudden? Well,
If only we had options, right?
right. Yeah.
But anyway,
If only we made enough money in our lodges to where we could help a brother out. Man, that would be awesome.
yeah.
Woo! Pipe dreams. We're going too far now.
They're getting crazy.
Getting crazy.
Crazy. Well, that's good.
That's awesome.
I don't have anything else to add. Do you have anything you want to add to this? I mean, I think this has been a great episode.
We really don't. I think that pretty much covers it all, and we haven't said anything that'll get anyone into trouble, which is good. We want to keep people out of trouble. Though really this year is such an awesome year. We've got so much opportunity this year, and hope and optimism. And in fact, that's why it's a good time to look at your lodge and how you want your culture to be. This is the right time to do that. We really have a period of all these years that we can really define our Freemasonry within our lodges. Something we've been afraid to do for so long. And the reason I'm saying it like this is because it has been a long time since people were without fear within our own fraternity in Texas. And so we're in a position
it
now.
feels like a long time. It's only been a year, right? But it feels like a long time.
Well,
I guess in before
I
that.
say it has. Yeah, I say it's been before that because this was just the epitome of how much control they really did have or perceive to have.
Mm-hmm.
Is this last year, because they really got very brazen last year.
Yeah, it was bold, but
when you get somebody pissed off enough like me,
that's not hard to do.
I know, right? That was a bad example. But no, this is seriously the right time for you to be looking at the culture of your lodge and say, you know what, guys? We've talked about this. We've actually, while we're having our scotch at home or at the bar next door, we've talked about this. And we always said we would love to have a culture in our lodge that was like this. We've all had those what if moments with our brothers. So this is your what if time. This is it. This is your what if moment. It's time to seize the day and really, really shape your Freemasonry.
Love it, man. Is that your final thought?
No.
Oh.
I thought it was rolling into a final thought, but I thought, no, I can't do that.
I don't have any final thoughts. I mean, I think.
Are you kidding me?
No, I mean, I said my final thoughts. I said it earlier. This is a great time to do it. Go ahead and look at your bylaws while you're doing your SOPs or your rules or regulations or guidelines or whatever you want to call them, as long as but I will say this, like I was telling Dennis and I mentioned earlier, this email I found with the guidelines is like for 2011 and it's not happening now. No one probably even knows they're there. So it's just like a bylaws. If it's not front and center, if nobody knows they're there, if it's not something that's looked at on a regular basis and changed to reflect the lodge, then I mean, frankly, that email is irrelevant. That thing I sent you, it's irrelevant to my lodge. They don't act like that. That's not that lodge. That's not It was when I was younger and more idealistic, and I wanted to shape the lodge through my guidelines, right? But that's not the way it should work. It should be the other way around. It's okay to have a template, and I think a lodge can work with that, right? But it's going to need some pretty big cutting and pasting and rewording and things like that. So be sure your guidelines need to reflect the culture of your lodge. Don't use your guidelines to manhandle the culture of your lodge in the direction that you want it to go. Right? There's a different way to do that, and that's not through your guidelines. Because if it's not relevant, people will just disregard it. Unfortunately, even though they're not supposed to.
Right, right. And that's what'll get you in trouble. When you disregard your rules and regulations, and that's why they really need to be called rules and regulations or standard operating procedures, something that sounds real and
SOP
enforceable.
is easier to say. If you go with standard operating procedure, you can say SOP. Rules and regulations. SOP. Maybe it's because I was in the military. It's like, that's against our SOPs. We can't do that.
Right. Well, I mean, we've always had SOPs in our businesses. It's always been SOPs for me also.
Yeah.
So here's my takeaway. Let's do this a different way. Dinner with Dennis. Today we had dinner after our floor school, and very proud of my lodge once again. We were talking at dinner that we would love to, number one, we're working towards the Vanguard this year.
Nice.
And because our culture, the culture of our lodge, is actually promoting that already. We're already doing a lot of the things, 95% of the stuff that we do already could be thrown into Vanguard like that. It's like, even with like the officers and stuff going to Grand Lodge and all that, man, we had that and the emphasis points and all that kind of stuff already. Our lodge is just already doing that. So that's one of the things that we were talking about tonight. Another thing we were talking about was, of course, the alcohol. We talked about that for a few minutes. That wasn't the heavy part of our conversation. One of the things that we had talked about was getting a graded degree done with our lodge. And then one of the brothers said, well, hey, let's do both the EA and the fellow craft. And I said, well, just focus on one. Let's make sure we get a good mark on one first. Next year we can build on that. We can always build on what we're doing. But the overall culture of our lodge today is so much different from when I joined this particular lodge. When I joined this particular lodge, the bylaws that were given to me were the bylaws that were written in 1854, I think.
Okay.
I mean, most of you guys that remember me in Texas Freemasons originally, remember me being the asshole that talked so sternly about our dues and how bogus they are and the degree fees and all that kind of stuff. And guess why? Guess why that is? It's because my handy little booklet of bylaws from 1854, I looked at those and I looked, oh, well, we're paying more now than what we did then. So how are they figuring this up? So I started looking at inflation. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're at 10% of what it should be.
What were the
paying
numbers,
10%.
Like, what did it shake out to? Out of curiosity, not to derail.
Oh, what was it supposed to be?
Like, well, based off what you saw,
our annual dues. Yeah, our annual dues would have been like $850 or something like that. Yeah. Annual dues would be like $850.
How about fish fries?
Yeah, right. Man, no more poor widows around here. They'd be rolling in it. But then But then the degree fees were like $1,800. No joke. All 3 degree fees were like $1,800 just to become a member. So talk about a culture shift. If you're not looking at where you are today based on where you come from, you're not doing yourself any justice. You're not doing your lodge any justice. If you don't truly understand who your brothers were when they formed your lodge, how in the hell do you have any right to pass on any kind of legacy to your kids? You don't. Because it's a false narrative. What you joined that was established in 1854 is not being upheld in your lodge today. So if it's not being upheld in your lodge today, how can you rightfully pass it on to your kids? How fair is that? How righteous is that legacy? Tell me that. Riddle me that.
What number did you say that was? Like 700 a year? Not to derail. Sorry.
850.
850?
Yeah.
I'm just looking real quick.
And that's
like $70 a month, dude. That's not a lot.
Right.
To me, I mean, frankly, especially with the way you can send auto draft, people pay more than that for their satellite right now. Imagine that if you had a lodge with people paying $70 a month.
People pay $250 a month for their entertainment. For entertainment. And that's just within their own house. So they don't have to leave their house. That's not even including going out to eat and going and doing the different fun things that they do on the weekends because they're so bored with just sitting and watching TV on during the week. Yeah. You know, you touched on something serious there.
It's a rabbit hole, and we always get hooked up on that. But yeah, it's
well, we ought to have that conversation soon because we haven't in a while. And it's something that we should, as good stewards of our lodges, as I was saying, our legacy depends on it. But unless we're really paying attention to where we come from, if we want to play this, my masonry comes from the 80s bullshit from the guys who decided not to raise dues for the last 50 years, we can't do that. And I realized that they were in a pinch. But you see the brothers like this past Grand Lodge.
Who all endowed at like $500 in 1985 or whatever, by the way.
Right. The day it was, the day it opened up.
Yeah.
Yes. And at that time, it was more money than it is today. So I'm not going to fault them because they did it with real vision, right? To them, it was like $2,000.
Well, I mean, the 80s were on fire. So, I mean, they didn't realize things would change, but they didn't adapt with it.
Not everybody had that coca money. So it was no, but seriously though, I mean, let's keep it all in perspective because they didn't all do that because that was a big chunk of change back then. Mm-hmm. Back then, $500 was like at least $1,200-$1,500 today, at least.
I think it was like 20 times the average dues, which is something we talked about before. I think it came out to something like that. I think the average dues was like $40, something like that.
Right.
I don't remember. It's been a while since I looked at it.
Right. That was back in 1983. Right. We're not much higher than that in Goliad still.
Oh, really?
Yes. Well, I mean, we're higher. Don't get me wrong, because I raised them when I became master of our lodge. But don't kid yourself. There's a lot of lodges out there that never made it past the 80s.
I'll tell you what. Let's do this. This Sunday when we go live, we'll talk about dues, okay? Because this is a whole, and we'll just make everybody angry while we're there.
Right? Let all of our members, piss everybody in the world off.
We'll let them know. Let them hop on.
But the reality is that we are in changing times. But if we're not really studying where we where we were to begin with, we will lose a lot of those traditions.
Mhm.
And one of those traditions was stature. Stature in your community. Being able to hold your own, carry your own, and carry your brother's weight if you needed to.
Mhm.
That's why it was so important to be where they were. So if we're not looking at what our bylaws were back in the 1850s when we're making the decisions on our bylaws today, then how are we really keeping up with the intent of our brothers of the past, right? I'm not saying that we have to do everything the same. I mean, hell, we're looking at going back to drinking alcohol, which was allowed back then in the 1850s.
Mhm.
Maybe we ought to get those bylaws out and see how to write them out the way that they would have wanted to back then. But seriously though, we have to look at the past so that we can look at the future and shape that the way that we need to in a responsible manner.
If you're gonna say that's not the way we've always done it, you can't pick and choose, right? If you don't stand by that, if you want that to be the hill you die on, that's not the way we always done it. Well, then fine, let's look at those 1850s bylaws and see how they
Yeah,
did it
don't bring me to that conversation. I'm going to prove you wrong all day long. And then if I do get stumped, I'm going to call my buddy Robert Marshall to back me up because he knows exactly what they are. And I'm not afraid to bow down and say, I got it wrong. If Robert Marshall says I got it wrong, I'm willing to concede. But don't make me bring out my buddies. Don't make me do it.
All right, guys, this was a good episode. Thanks for coming on and being a guest tonight, Dennis. Appreciate that.
Yep.
So,
always.
see y'all.
Yeah, somebody's got to jump in and carry your weight.
Mhm.
I am that.
Keep
brother.
it.
I am that
Keep it
brother.
points.
I am that brother willing to carry.